Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to season 3 of the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Kayla Smith, CEO of the Hormone Puzzle Society, a women's health hub for fertility, hormones, and pregnancy, an integrative, holistic nutritionist, doctor of natural medicine and training, creator of the Hormone Puzzle Method, an infertility warrior, 2-time boy mom, and women's health expert. This podcast is for women struggling with infertility, painful periods, terrible PMS, or really just any symptoms of hormone imbalance that they are ready to eliminate for good. Tune in weekly as we interview amazing experts in the field of women's health, breaking down those hormone walls, nerding out on nutrition, and having way too much fun. Whether you're beginning your journey or you've been struggling for years, we're going to finally help you put those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together so that you can get pregnant and eliminate those pesky symptoms for good. Not to mention, stay pregnant, have a healthy super baby, and easy postpartum. Are you ready? This season is packed with even more expert guests, sharing groundbreaking knowledge, giving you that jolt of energy that you so desperately need, sending you lots of virtual hugs, and inspiring you to take your fertility into your own hands and make that baby. Thank you all so much for tuning in and being amazing listeners. So now let's get started on your road to transformation. On today's show, we have Dr. Melanie Keller, who is a naturopathic doctor and also known as the Intuitive Edge Doctor. She helps people understand their bodies, lives, and businesses better so they can receive the curated care they need. After having gut health problems for over half her life, Dr. Melanie uses her naturopathic expertise and epigenetics intuition to get results. On today's show, we're talking all about epigenetics and your fertility. How your genes are only a small part of the puzzle, but the environment you put your genes in plays such a huge role. We're also going to talk about MTHFR gene mutation and how that can affect your fertility, and the one vitamin that is highly recommended, but that's actually causing you harm. All this and more on today's show. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Melanie to our show. Hey, Dr. Melanie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to talk to you. I was putting together some of these notes and I was like, we haven't talked a lot about epigenetics, which is so important. So super excited about this. So let's dive into that. Tell me a little more about you and what really inspired you to become a naturopath.
Well, so I was raised in, after moving around a lot as a child, we ended up in Southeast Alaska in a very, very small rural town, like 4 hours by car or, 4 hours by boat.
Oh my gosh.
There was no fast food, no movie theater, it was very, very rural. And I was raised on this pristine diet of, literally spring water and salmon, et cetera, et cetera. And yet I struggled with problems with my weight as a child. And I'm talking, did all the things, right? And then it was kind of that heaviness on you of like, what's wrong with me because I'm doing all the right things. And then of course puberty hits and then, it's my own journey going into college, et cetera. And so all of the things that I always tried either never seemed to work for me, or it was like eat more fiber or something would make my constipation worse, or just all of these things. And that's really challenging on the psyche of a child.
Right.
But yet I was always introduced to natural ways. Even as rural as we were, we had people who came to our small town, chiropractic. So I was always raised around what is a naturopathic way of doing things, and even, grew up in the coffee shop co-op store type of thing, right? So I was always reading books, etc. And in terms of looking at medical schools, that was my best, when I was touring them, et cetera, it was like, oh, this is the place I want to be. There was definitely more openness to be yourself and your unique epigenetic self,
Yes.
even in school.
I love it. Amazing. I love it. So let's talk about epigenetics. This is something that I try to stress to my clients and what I'm learning a lot more about. And I'm actually getting my PhD. And we talk a lot about this, how we've been so programmed to think genetics plays such a huge role. And obviously it does, but it's also the environment that our cells are in that plays an even bigger role. So tell us about that. What is epigenetics?
Well, I like to reference the CDC because a lot of times it's actually, people can understand it a bit better. And they talk about how it's the study of how your behaviors and the environment can make changes to the way your genes work. So it's not actually changing the genetic code. It's just changing the way the body reads it. So an example I was thinking of, and I'll often talk about myself to not like point anything out, but I'll say in my environment, I was raised in a heavy secondhand smoke. That was fairly common back in the 70s. And I'm even thinking of my grandmother's house and just walking in, and it was like that boom scent of just saturated everything, right? The walls, the furniture, etc. So those are things that maybe I was exposed to, right? But somebody else has never been exposed to that. They don't even know what I'm describing, right? So those are things that, and if it was repeated or I was kind of trapped in that smoke bubble, right? I'm going to have my genes are going to respond differently than the person who was not. And they've even seen this with identical twins.
For sure. And it's so crazy you say that, because back in the 70s, I can remember my parents telling me how their parents would ride around in a station wagon with all the windows up smoking. Like, what? With all these kids in the back, and it's just, I can't believe it. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense for sure. And so talk a little bit about what is the relationship with fertility? Like, how do we put a fertility lens on this and bring in gut health a little bit? Why is that? How does our fertility and our gut and our epigenetics all kind of tie in together?
Sure. Well, there is a memorable acronym that many people may know in terms of MTHFR. And that one has the most claim to fame, I will say, in terms of studying and observation in terms of fertility. So the way that I describe it to my gut health patients is I'll say, because here's the number one question I would get as it relates to gut health. Do I need to take enzymes? So I'm just breaking this down very simply. So, and again, I will use myself. I am a mutant in terms of I received 2 variations from each one of my parents. So for this particular, and I'm referring to MTHFR specifically, I have a propensity. This does not mean it's a given, but I have a propensity to have 50% decreased enzymatic activity. Now, again, I'm isolating digestive enzymes, but just kind of look at that as the overall enzymatic activity in my entire body. So if I am in that smoke-filled room, perhaps, say, for example, because environmental chemicals are something that can dirty this gene, then I'm going to be more towards that end of 50% enzymatic function, okay? There's another mutation where somebody could have up to 75% decreased enzymatic function. So if that human is trying to produce a child, right, and reproduce and at a rapid rate and all of the activity that needs to take place there, they just have a propensity for that to possibly not work out. Hence, maybe increased miscarriage risk. Possibly, right? So what can we do to enhance that 75 or even the 50%? And there is a mutation where it's 25%. Where can we do to help build that foundation to ensure a higher propensity outcome of saying, okay, even if I've had a history of miscarriage, it doesn't mean that it's a done deal, right? It means that, oh, that's something to look at. This is something I can actually dive deeper into and have a better assessment as to how to support that foundation.
For sure. And so many questions around this. Like, we can go in a rabbit hole right here, but I'll try not to. So how does somebody know that they have MTHFR? Is there markers for that? Or is that something where we can only do like a blood test for?
Yeah, it's most commonly a blood test. I'm just racking my brain if anyone has a salivary test. I think there might be a company out there, But most often, and then there's other ways where, for example, I've used a test that is salivary, and it has not only MTHFR, it has a lot more of other mutations. So we refer to them as SNPs. And then there's other places where they'll say, oh yeah, that's a blood test we can do. They're only isolating it. And it can depend. A lot of times, some conventional doctors may not see the correlation and may not want to order that test. So that's why I was hesitant, because I'm like, well, if it's in your insurance model, if you're in the conventional mind frame, then yes, it's a blood test. And then if you're in the functional naturopathic model, you have options of salivary testing and getting more information, because MTHFR in and of itself is, I like to think of like a Monet painting. If anyone's familiar, it's like one of the dots
right.
in the multitude of dots that create this beautiful scene.
Yes, gotcha. And then to talk about the enzymes, like how would we know that those are off? And is that something where we would need to supplement with enzymes, or is that again you can't spot correct fertility. You have to look at the whole.
Right. So for example, getting back to the gut health thing. So if I have somebody who in their focus is family planning, then I'll look at, okay, does your stool float or sink? These are some of my key things, right? So I'll say, well, is your stool floating? And they'll say, no, it's not floating. And not everybody has toilets that will indicate this. But then I'll say, you don't need the enzymes. Keep them on hold, have them in your medicine cabinet, check to see when they may expire. But if your stool floats, right, as we're working together and working through things of most often that's a fat malabsorption, then I'll ask them, hey, has your stool started floating, then perhaps for a temporarily portion, right, until it stops floating, then they come off of the enzymes. Because again, we're really trying to push on the accelerator and the brake and listen to all of these pathways kind of simultaneously to get them in concert with one another, not just put a Band-Aid on the boat and hope we don't sink, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, and that's, for example, for myself with my history of constipation and all of the things, more activity, more water, more fiber, all those things that would most often make it worse. But for my epigenetic tendencies, I found out that I've had a history of low vitamin D, and I'm talking low, like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh my goodness.
And that's a fat soluble hormone and vitamin that when I had what's called small intestine bacterial overgrowth, that's affecting my absorption of fat soluble vitamins, then that can be one reason why my vitamin D is low. But also vitamin D is a cofactor of getting thyroid at the cellular level. So if I have low vitamin D is supposed to be ringing the doorbell to get me to have the activated, feel like I have thyroid, let's say. And these are even people on thyroid medication, but they don't have this connection to the doorbell ringing low vitamin D. Well, it turns out you might have a genetic tendency to have low vitamin D. And that's something, instead of just, my mentor even talked about how naturopaths were considered quacks, for recommending ordering vitamin D testing. And now we've now recognized important, right? And even getting it measured twice a year. And so for myself, I might need to measure it a little bit more in addition to watching my thyroid levels. So that's how these are all connected, because in terms of fertility, we have a 3-legged stool, at least that's how I reference it, from our gonads and sex hormones, our thyroid, and our adrenal glands. And our adrenal glands can just be, a lot of people will equate that to stress. How is your stress management? Because again, these are all also factors that affect MTHFR, psychological stress, excess physical stress, and these chemicals, what we mentioned, the secondhand smoke. So those are the ways they can compound on each other. Or for example, myself, I suffered from constipation, and none of the things, quite frankly, even treating the SIBO, which I'm an expert in, truly helped, or it kept coming back because I wasn't getting to the underlying root cause of why I had it in the first place. Yes, there were risk factors as to why I had it. But when I looked under my epigenetic hood, I was like, oh, look, I have a challenge rather with creating bile, and I could assist my system in creating better bile, more bile, etc., because bile in and of itself is an antimicrobial. And that's the problem in SIBO, is that they can actually make our bile non-functional for us and go, oh, well, thanks. We know that you can kill us, so we're going to actually do something about that. Well, bile also helps us recycle our hormones. So not only is that going to, shift how my gut, I call it the hormone microbe shuffle. So you're kind of constantly going, fix your gut, but then that shuffles your hormones. You go and fix your hormones and that shuffles your gut. Well, if that's the case, then there's an underlying common denominator between the two of them. And that is where I then turned to epigenetics, because that's what I needed myself. I was like, oh, once I support my bile production, I went from literally, my mom can recall me crying in my 20s, like, I'm going to die from colon cancer, because I just felt how toxic I was, to, I can't remember the last time I was constipated. Right. And to know that difference, and even helping people who go through that, to just be like, look, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I know you don't know what that's like, because I suffered from it my entire child, like that was the norm. And then it's like, I also will say, when do we stop talking about our diapers? Right. Why is it we know our children's and our elderly's diapers really well? We know what's going on with them, but in between, we kind of stop talking about it. So.
Right. I love that. And I think it's so important, again, to just point out why working with a naturopathic doctor like yourself can help us in so many ways, because we're looking under the hood and really getting down deep into that root cause, which is going to show us why these symptoms are happening in the first place. And so instead of just putting the Band-Aid on it, like you said, we're actually fixing it so we don't need the Band-Aid. So I love that. And you talk about something called an epigenetic age. What does that mean?
So this is where I was actually just going to say that there'll be some people, and I mean this with all due professional courtesy and respect, that they understand epigenetics, meaning they might know how to read a report. And this report might say, oh, take this for that and that for this. But then a couple pages down, it's actually contradicting it with take that for this. And you're like, oh, but I'm not supposed to take that for this. Right. It's kind of one of those things where, and your expert should really know, if not preface and being like, hey, this is why, this is what we're going to observe. This is the overall arching picture and how it all combines together. Because you definitely want to take things with a grain of potassium. Genetic age, we're not saying this equals that. We're not saying take this for that. We're saying, let's look at the overall arching picture of the whole thing and look at methylation in general. So methylation is what we really want to know what's going on. And that can give us even an intrinsic age and an extrinsic age. So that's in terms of, let's say, what am I doing from the outside in that's affecting my age and my environment? And then how is my inside responding to that? So I might have my chronological stated age is blank, but all of the things that I am doing to help my chronological, to be proactive, might look at my biological age and say, thumbs up, you're doing a great job. You're actually younger than your stated age. And ideally, we want to be 7 years younger than our chronological age. That's really showing you the benefits of doing all of these things, right? Because we know it's an investment to eat organic, to do all the good things. It's an investment in money and time and mental, all of these things, right? And even, like I said, oh, must not be doing it right because you don't look better or you're not getting results. And you got to put a lot of that aside. And you can get this test and really actually see that you are doing the right things, let's say, and sure, there's more you can do. And then let's say we implement meditation, because that has research that shows it can be beneficial. And then when you get a repeat test, you're like, oh, wow, my efforts in meditation, et cetera, are helping me have not only a longer life, but a better quality of life. Mm-hmm. So when I found out my intrinsic, so let's refer to that as like my immune system. Turns out my immune system's age is 15 years younger than my chronological age. Mm. Now, does that mean I'm going to go and run around maskless and licking,
Right?
going
No.
wild and crazy. No, but does it make me feel a bit better? And again, my efforts are like, okay, great. Reason to keep your vitamin D up, etc. And how to maintain that, because again, there can be a lot of, say, for example, with my epigenetics, someone can tell me, oh, you should take turmeric. Turmeric is the best thing ever. It's anti-inflammatory. It's this, it's that, and all the highlights of all the evidence about turmeric. Well, guess what? Not in my body, not for my pathways. And I know that very clearly. So I can respectfully say, thank you. I appreciate all of your enthusiasm about turmeric, but that's not for me. And you want to be able to have somebody hear that.
For sure.
And not say, oh, you just need this turmeric. Oh, you need this version of turmeric. Oh.
Right. And I think that goes back to really knowing yourself and intuitively knowing what you need, listening to your body's symptoms. Because I'm sure the way you found out you couldn't have turmeric is by seeing symptoms of eating turmeric. It's like, this doesn't agree with me. And it's all about finding that individual, protocol for yourself instead of going off of a cookie cutter one. So I love that. Amazing. And I could continue this conversation, but I know we have to take a break. We're going to hear a word from our sponsors. We're going to come back and talk practical tips. What can we do to optimize our fertility and improve our epigenetics? We'll be right back. Hey y'all, it's Coach Kayla here. I hope you are loving this episode as much as I am. We will be back in just a minute, but first, a word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L.E Society, a women's health hub for fertility, hormones, and the business of coaching. Whether you're struggling to get pregnant with pesky hormone symptoms, or you're working to build a career in the fertility and women's health space, we have you covered. Visit our website at www.coachkayla.com to learn more on how we can help you. Text the keyword fertility to 615-257-8855 for your free fertility meal plan. Hey, Dr. Melanie, welcome back.
Thank you.
So let's talk top tips. What are maybe your top 5 things that we should start doing today to optimize our fertility and really optimize our epigenetics?
Top tips, I would say, let's look at your environment and what you're doing most often. So really, I look at water. So is your water filtered? That is important. Not only your drinking water, but your shower water. So depending on where you live, so those are the best things I would say to invest in first and foremost. Then secondly, I'm all about, since we've spent so much time indoors recently, I am all about highlighting your air purification. Now, this can get a little overwhelming in terms of there are a lot of options and there are a lot of price points. But if anybody can see this right now, I'm sitting with a lot of houseplants, and houseplants are our friends when it comes to air purification. So I would recommend, even talking to a gardener or, at the store. Some stores even will have refunds or success rates on their plants. I know a couple of major departments that do. And that's how I learned how to get the right plants and the right environments and how to not kill them. And there are some really great ones that will last and even provide oxygen. So in some cases, this might be good in the bedroom, again, depending on where somebody is in their sleep quality, et cetera. So they can be pretty much placed everywhere. And that's going to help enhance the air quality. Then when it comes to supplementation, I think it is essential for people to be mindful of what's called folic acid. And this is the reason why. It's because it's everywhere. It's not only in prenatal vitamins, but it's in a lot of what's referred to as fortified foods. And there's a reason for this, but at the same time, your body responds to folic acid as if my mentor refers to it as even if it's a poison, because it's blocking receptors to your folate, and the folate is what you want. That's actually the intention of what they really want you to be having. And folate is also ideally activated, so it'll have a methyl is the word in front of it. So if we want to have something, again, let's go back to our MTHFR example. For myself, it is best for me to have methylated folate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the same time, some people can have interesting responses to methylated folate, meaning, again, we can get into the whole constellation of somebody's epigenetics. And so you might want to slowly introduce that. Again, some expert might say, oh, you need high dose methylfolate. My recommendation would always be, sure, I can appreciate that thinking. However, let's titrate ourselves there so that we can really very clearly see, because sometimes there's this tipping point where this dose was just fabulous and people are feeling amazing. And then you increase it just a little bit and things start to go off kilter. And again, just because you think it's a good thing doesn't mean that it's not creating a little wobbly in the spin, right? So
Exactly.
we just want to be able to identify that easily and smoothly. Let's see. So what else? I can't stress enough the value, and I even had the eye roll about what I'm about to say about meditation in terms of if it's not your thing, it can get that eye roll response. But I think a lot of times people will look at meditation as I have to sit and I have to clear my mind. I have to do it a certain way. And what I know from assessing a lot of my patients and clients is that I'm observing their life and where they are meditative. And so I like to call it like multitask, right? So I'll say, oh no, you know what? When you're on that treadmill, that's when you are meditating. You are in the zone. Whereas before, when I was trying to include it into their life or insert it somewhere and it just wasn't working. Instead, I'm able to observe, oh, look, you actually are already doing this. And when they acknowledge that, they're able to go, oh, wow, and get even deeper into that practice and meaning. And, we might have had this, sure, we were looking at it as a meditation, it was, but now that we've acknowledged it, it's even that much more effective for people. So I think that's really a great thing. They feel good about themselves too.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of research there. And then of course, activity, movement in our bodies creates movement in our life. And so if you're wanting to actually create life, right? And a lot of times people think that maybe this has to be either a certain way, a certain amount, has to be vigorous. And, and in fact, there's more studies that are showing sometimes people have a tendency to over exercise and they're actually not having enough downtime in between muscle building sets, say, for example. So while, again, we mean to do something good and get my body in shape and ready to carry this new life, at the same time, we want to find that balance. And that's where epigenetic reports can actually help with that. For me to find out that I am more of an endurance, like my genes tend towards more endurance versus, say, powerlifting. And there's other report, you can get more details about your exercise tolerance and capacity, et cetera. And that can just help tailor your exercise program. Again, if you're working with a physical trainer or somebody who understands this, because there are more and more of them that are out there, right? Because one size doesn't fit all. And they're like, oh, geez, and they see, of course, everybody wants to see their successes, right? Even myself, right? But we also really want to study the people who don't do as well on our protocols and wonder why. And that's, again, that's epigenetics.
For sure. And so where would we get some of this epigenetic testing that you speak about?
It's fairly, well, I'm sure many people are aware of 23andMe, and that's gone through a wave of ups and downs and opinions, but I think it's really been stabilized in terms of safety and security of our information. I think that's really valuable starting point, because so many companies, as many of them tried to branch off and do their own thing, you're finding a lot of times if you've invested, and I would say go for the around $200, I think they have a $150 and a $200 option. If you go for the $200, you're going to have the information you need for many other companies that offer for you to upload the raw data that you get from 23andMe. So, I mean, there are so many reports now these days, one for skin, for exercise, I mean, you name it, more and more are coming out. In fact, that can be part of the overwhelm. Even for myself as an expert in this, I'm like, which company is legitimate and which, is this really valuable information for people? So of course, take everything with a grain of potassium.
Right, right. And I loved your tips, by the way. I completely agree with all of those. But to go back to the folic acid, I was just having this conversation the other day, how it's just in so many things, even health foods have it in there. And I'm like, do you know if there's a reason why it's used? Is it because it's cheaper?
Right. Well, the fact is that, and I'm just racking my brain of exactly like what department, what governmental,
Right.
what time frame, and what's the history on this really of fortified foods. And so that's going way back to some nutritional classes. So I don't know exactly when this happened, but it was to prevent neural tube defects. I mean, so everything that we know, right, in terms of things that we want to prep our body for prevention of, and that's a big thing. That's why it gets so much attention. And it's almost like it got blanketed. Does that make like, I think when its intention was great, right? It's like, say, for example, scurvy. Not many people maybe even know what that is, or they've heard it in history books. We don't really know what a vitamin C deficiency looks like in this day and age, right? Or at least in our industrialized country. Versus at the time, there's just, even my parents, right? They've seen diseases that we can't comprehend, right? And so, yeah, that's in terms of, I don't know why it is still as it is, because there's plenty and clear evidence as to why it has to be in so many things. It's an excellent question and probably could use some support around changing it.
Right, right. And so is this something where even if we don't know that we have MTHFR, should we just try to avoid folic acid and just try to look towards folate?
Yeah, well, so we all have
if you
MTHFR.
Can avoid.
We all have it. We just don't know which version we have, right? So yeah, basically, no matter what variation you have of this gene, it's not our friend.
Gotcha.
It is, yeah. And even when people, well, let's say, for example, they'll have their folate measured you can have your B12 and folate measured in the blood. And that's misleading because it's actually including the folic acid as well. So it can be looking at the folate that you're consuming. So where do we get folate from food predominantly, right? If we're not taking it supplemental. And green leafy vegetables are really your best friend. Depends on if you're vegan, vegetarian. You also want to get in some other forms of animal proteins. And then also riboflavin. So just like I mentioned, vitamin D rings the doorbell for thyroid. You have other cofactors. These are doorbell ringers that help with this pathway of MTHFR. So for example, riboflavin or B2 is one that I say, okay, is this also adequately in the picture to help this process go smoothly?
For sure. And one other thing you mentioned that I really liked, and I wanted to kind of go back to it, is it's not about adding more, like you were saying, add it slowly. In homeopathy and in naturopathy and all of that, it's really about your body's connection with the things you're adding. So if you're doing a supplement or herbs or a vitamin, add it slow and add sometimes less is more. It's not like more is better. So I love that you said that. Do you want to speak on that for a second?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, again, like I said, instead of just isolating the MTHFR test, right, almost for the same amount of money, I could get this other test that has an expanded, more information. And part of that expanded information again, I'm going to talk about one little paint drop in the picture, but it told me at least that I am a slow metabolizer of drugs, chemicals, and maybe supplements. So perhaps my response to turmeric is that I'm slower to process turmeric at that particular pathway. So that's another reason. And more often than not, you'll hear people who say, look, I'm pretty sensitive to medications. I myself was given a medication. I was supposed to take it every 24 hours and something didn't feel right. I was like, oh, I almost feel over drugged, right? And it turns out, and I'm a doctor, yes, doctors can make the worst patients. I was like, what if I just, took it at every 36 hours instead? And oh my goodness, I felt so much better. I got a better outcome. And that's because I know I'm a slow acetylator. And so that made sense to me. And again, you kind of have a tendency to draw in who you are like in some ways. I don't know if you've noticed that. So
Yes.
I'll understand the people that go, oh, listen, Dr. Keller, like, you gotta hear me. I'm really sensitive. I'm like, I know. I'll even have people just put a little drop in their inside of their lip or dilute it in water, you know, and then you have other people who say, they've given me this med and I don't know, it just seems to, it almost is like it runs right through them, and they might be fast metabolizers of medications. So again, that can just be where, now that I know this about myself, this actually came up for a patient who knew this about themselves as well, and they were going to have anesthesia. And an anesthesiologist actually asked me, were there any, you know, mutations or, you know, any epigenetics that they could be aware of that they should know about this case? And I just happened to point that out. I was like, I don't know, they might think this is, but they were very grateful and were able to make adjustments, not only with her weight, right, but to also factor that in for her coming out of anesthesia. So, yeah.
I love that. And again, goes back to knowing your body and listening to your body and responding the way that you need to. So I love that. So tell us where we can find you. Where can we learn more about working with you?
My website is intuitiveedgedoctor.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Melanie_ND.
I love it. And we'll add that to our show notes, so it'll be real easy to find you. And tell us before we close. Well, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I loved this conversation. I feel a real connection to you. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. And then before we close, just any final thoughts, anything you want to leave us with, words of encouragement or motivation?
Yeah, I just want to encourage people to find their person, you know, you'll know. I think people really do know. I think there's a difference between, oh, I really want this, and this, I think this is the person, to when you really know you've got the right person that can help you achieve what it is that you want.
For sure. I love it. Oh, well, Dr. Melanie, thanks again.
Thank you.
And thank you, ladies, for listening to the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. Until next time, bye. Hey, hang on just 1 second before you go. I want to make sure that you are aware of all of the amazing free resources that I have for you on my website at CoachKayla.com. From a fertility meal plan, a cycle syncing quick start guide, a holistic healing cookbook, as well as master classes, blog posts by me and some amazing experts in the fields of fertility, hormones, and nutrition. So many wonderful resources that will help you on your journey. And I wish there had been something like this when I was going through my 2 years of infertility, but there just wasn't. And so that's why I decided to create all of this for you. So make sure that you go and check it out and you take advantage of this plethora of support that I have provided for you. And spoiler alert, these were some of the same tricks and the same foods that I used to get myself pregnant, not once, but twice, even after my doctors said that I couldn't. So I know that these things work. Make sure you take advantage of that. And I cannot wait for you to be my next success story. So thanks, love. See you soon. Thanks for tuning in today to the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. Check out the show notes for today's episode at CoachKayla.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next week.